I was listening to YouTube yesterday on autoplay while playing Tom Clancy's The Division 2 with my son. He's been very interested. Like, he's super interested. I mean, I was like, dude, I'm not buying you the DLC, because I bought everybody a copy of all this. He's like, Dad, I'll cover it. I was like, oh, crud. So I looked at his mom. Mom was like, yeah. Budget committee was like, sure. If he wants to pay for it, he's been working with, family, and they've been paying him for doing some, farm work and housework and stuff. So he pulled out. He pulled out that $15 for the DLC. I said, all right, no problem. So we're jamming out, and I'm listening to YouTube on autoplay, and JTech's video comes out, and it just comes up, and I'm just listening to it, and then he said something that made me look at my phone and look at the timestamp and said, what did he just say? And JTech, I'm gonna presume, and in all transparency, that you are a open-minded gentleman, and what you said in this video is absolutely misguided, and I want to point that out to you. And I don't know if you're ever going to watch this video, but listen to what you just said over here.
But yeah, I want everybody to understand that putting a sticker on something does not make it that thing. It's an example of this. If you get a tattoo of the Superman logo on your body, does that make you Superman?
All right. So, JTech, I know exactly what you're saying. What you're probably going to insinuate, because I listened to your video for about 28, 30 minutes, is that Xbox and Asus working together, and Xbox putting a button on the ROG Ally X, which the Xbox Ally X has a different design. It's not even the same design. It uses a different chip. You're trying to say it's not an Xbox. But JTech, you would be wrong if you took that notion to other components that are even made by the big dog, the boss, in terms of these devices, AMD. AMD has the 9070 XT model, and this one that I have over here is the Gigabyte version, right? So Gigabyte made this card as a proprietary card for AMD, but it is a partner card. Usually, AMD and even NVIDIA would make their own reference models, but in the case of the 9070 XT, AMD did not release a reference model. You can never tell anybody that this card here is not an AMD card because Gigabyte made it. You can't do that. You're bringing out some of the things that I did not ever want to I never wanted to show people my PC gear. I mean, there are people who come on my channel or on Twitter telling me, oh, you're an Xbox, you're an Xbox refugee. Child, you have no idea how much of a freaking enthusiast I am in terms of PC components. I just shut my mouth and I just play this whole let's talk about data in the if you walk into my lair, which is the PC area, you best be ready for all the work and all of the body of knowledge that you require to even make some statements in this area. And so now, those of you who've been talking about consoles for a long time, you're now in this ecosystem. You're now here. You're making this video, and this video you're probably making it with a PC. And there's a likelihood that you're using a component in that PC that was made by a different manufacturer for either AMD or Intel. I can almost bet that you are probably not using a reference AMD or a reference NVIDIA card. And if you are, great, but this argument cannot fly. Forget Twitter. It's time for everybody to grow up and pick up a book and pick up an article and pick up a press release and look through history of hardware components. In fact, yesterday, once this stuff started, I started looking around and saying, yo, did AMD even bother making a reference model of the 9070 XT? Because they've made reference model of the 7900 XTX, the 7900 XT and GRE and a lot of their other cards. But now, with the 9000 series, you go on their website, because you could mostly buy the reference cards on their website. You just see it listed as partners: Acer, ASRock, Asus, Gigabyte, PowerColor, Sapphire, Vastar More. I've never even heard of this partner before. XFX, I got an XFX AMD card. I think XFX basically only makes AMD cards, if I'm correct. Gigabyte makes AMD and NVIDIA cards, like I showed y'all yesterday in my video. Asus makes both AMD and NVIDIA cards, as I showed you guys yesterday. Let's get on Twitter so I can show you this stuff, Mr. JTech, so that you guys don't go on continuing to make this and nobody checks you, right, at the door. Let me see. Hold on. Where is that? Yeah. This right here. Asus makes a 4090. NVIDIA also made a 4090 reference model. But you cannot tell me that because somebody puts a sticker or because somebody else made your item that it doesn't belong to you. That, sir, is a misnomer. Okay? This is something that I'm seeing a lot of people pursue and try to basically, what you want is you want to take something away from the device. But in doing so, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're pointing out that you are not aware of how hardware works, especially with the hardware partners, and even with the boss in terms of their, the way they develop their products. Because this is the same AMD, by the way, JTech, that makes its components that are actually embedded within the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. And they themselves are pretty much not necessarily, perturbed by working with partners, because they understand that the partnerships has been basically what has taken them, to where it is that they are. Production is basically put on the partners. They give the partners kind of a pricing metric. Sometimes they give the partners vouchers so the partners can discount those items. And even Mrs. Fryer said something like that in her video, that it's easier to just work with Asus, who've already made a product like that before, understands the manufacturing and has negotiated a lot of the components, and just basically go ahead and do that. And for those of you that continue to say that that is a thing, you got to understand that the Asus ROG Ally X, right, and the Xbox Ally X are two different devices in their design and their style, and one of them is distinctly different from the other in terms of design and in terms of customization. There just is this weird, frame of mind and standard that people want to put on these devices to make it seem like, oh, they just put an Xbox logo right there. Okay, sure, but they redesigned the device to stand out from its predecessor. So it's not like they're just bringing out another, ROG Ally. And, this device, they even said, we've designed it so that it will take on the, the Xbox controller look on the sides. Even Linus Tech was like, yo, I was using this thing and the controller feels more like a PlayStation 5 DualSense 5 controller in his assessment. Let's keep listening to some of the other things you're going to say, in attachment to this.
You spent money, right, to get tattoo on your body. So you spent money to get a symbol. Does that mean that you are that symbol? In this case, Superman? You get a Superman tattoo. Does that make you Superman? So Microsoft spends money to get their logo, their Xbox logo, put on a PC handheld, a PC VR headset. Does that make it, that PC, that VR headset, or that handheld, does that make it a real Xbox?
You keep saying that, but when we actually assess and say, well, freaking Acer, basically is making this GPU for Radeon, does it make it a real Radeon device? Again, you cannot. Do you hear me? You cannot make this kind of categorization. You will school yourself. I recommend that you just drop it and admit something very important, that with this whole PC thing that you all have spent all this time crapping on and clowning on, you are way out of your depth and way out of your league if you don't come with some humility to learn what this platform is about. You see, many console gamers have and I've been reading a lot of the comments since I've been talking and making PC videos like, hey man, here's what PC has to offer. You've said that PC has all this headache and all this stuff. And I see that attitude is what a lot of people are assessing this device with, that, oh, this is some kind of a headache that they couldn't be bothered with. It's time for you to be bothered because you're saying things that are just not true. So now you've put yourself in a situation where ignorance can't save you, because it's either you don't know or you don't care. Because in order for you to know, you can simply just go around and do the work. Again, just because ASUS is making components for a proprietary manufacturer does not stop the product from actually being the product that they say that it is. Feel me? You see the ASUS logo up here in this image here, and you see the NVIDIA logo here. Do you see that? But inside these two components are TSMC chips. In fact, we could just look it up. RTX 4090 components. You'll realize that they're sourcing these devices, right, from the manufacturers of these interesting chips. Where did they even say it here? TSMC. We need to go to somewhere else where they're willing to basically tell us all what's inside of these things, so that way you can see it yourself. Here we go. GPU name 8102, GPU variant 8102-300A1, architecture Ada Lovelace, foundry TSMC. This is the chip maker that is pretty much supplying the chips across the board. In the case of the Rogue Ally X and Rogue Xbox Ally X, the chip supplier is our people over at AMD, the partnership. I just wanted to take I wanted to take the time to make this video dedicated to JTech, and I will probably at you in this video, or maybe I'll at you on Twitter, I don't know. But I want for you to come into this conversation with a solid landing. Okay? All this talk about, oh, the hardware is not proprietary, so it doesn't mean it's an Xbox, is a failed argument. It can't work. Again, there is so much precedence in the area of PC hardware, or even hardware itself from the console side, especially since they went to the x86 architecture, that you can't necessarily make this, you can't make this argument. It's just not going to work in your favor. Okay? I'm just being, as transparent as I possibly can to say that, to me, I just feel like a lot of, malice is here in some sense, but I'm not going to conclude that. Because when we look inside of your PS5, we see that the component on the left is a similar architecture. Basically, AMD took those boards that were defective from the PS5 and made a motherboard out of it. So that board is not even a proprietary PlayStation 5 board. It's AMD's board. They're just like, hey, we're going to help you out. But when we have boards that are defective, we get to do what we want with them. The one on the right is the Series X board, repurposed to be a motherboard, but carrying that same chip in the middle here, because you don't have a CPU slot. You have that same chip, that APU. They've disabled the GPU side of it, the graphics processing unit side of it, and have added PCIEs so that you can use external graphics cards. One is a micro ATX form. The other one, they made a mini ITX form. And you could already tell, because inside of the PS5, right, you could tell that the PS5 is using a mini ITX form factor because of the way the design is and the way it's slick and the way it's, it's designed to stand upright. So, thank you for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Talk to me in the comment section. Peace out.